in 2018, a ranking of most influential, or to simplify it, greatest films or greatest directors and performers was released via a scientific analysis by a couple of Italian researchers. The analysis is called Identification of Key Films and Personalities in the History of Cinema from a Western Perspective. And it was published by a site called Applied Network Science. So if you go to the website Applied Network Science, it really gives you the whole critical analysis, or actually scientific analysis. And in judging what the greatest films or greatest directors are, it's not at all based on box office revenue or critical acclaim, upon the initial release of these films. It's really the best thing for me to do is I'm going to read an exact quote from the study, so bear with me, but you'll get some idea. And I quote, "Our objective is to measure the success of a movie by accounting how much it has influenced other movies produced after its release, from both the artistic and the economic point of view. We apply our method on the subset of the Internet Movie Database citation network consisting of around 47,000 international movies, and we derive a list of films that can be considered milestones in the history of cinema. For each movie, we also collect data on its year of release, genres, and countries of production to analyze trends and patterns in the film industry according to such features. We also collect data on 20,000 directors and almost 400,000 performers, and we use the network of references and our score of movies for evaluating their career and for ranking them. Since the Internet Movie Database we employ is highly biased toward European and North American movies and personalities, our findings can be considered relevant principally for Western culture." So what am I getting at? So in other words, their view of greatest films of all time and greatest directors of all time, in fact, their scientific analysis is less to do with box office and critical acclaim, more to do with how they've influenced filmmaking over time, filmmakers over time, and basically, I would say the lasting power of such films. And the rankings of the greatest or top, directors of all time. Number one, unsurprisingly, is Alfred Hitchcock. Number two, also unsurprisingly, is Steven Spielberg. But number three, believe it or not, is Brian De Palma. Now, that seems like a surprise. Heck, even for De Palma fans like me, we're a little pleasantly surprised. But they go from decade to decade. And for example, in the 1970s, Brian De Palma was second only to Robert Altman in terms of the influential nature of the 1970s films that they made. So Robert Altman was number one. Brian De Palma was actually number two in the 70s, and then Coppola was there, and Clint Eastwood, and some others. So, but remember, this is about influence, and when you really think about it, Scarface is highly influential, Carrie is highly influential, Mission Impossible influential, The Untouchables, Blowout. A lot of his films have been reassessed over the years and went from maybe a flop to a cult classic, or in some cases just a straight up classic. And before you start thinking, maybe it's a fluke or there's a mistake in the, flaw in the scientific system, I mean, among the top 20 is also Howard Hawks, John Ford, Martin Scorsese's in the top 20, Ingmar Bergman, Quentin Tarantino, David Cronenberg, Michael Curtiz, John Carpenter, Clint Eastwood, Tim Burton and John Landis. I mean, all highly influential directors and all pretty much make sense. But De Palma is number 3. Now, this would suggest what many of us De Palma fans already knew, frankly, and that is that most of De Palma's films that were deemed unsuccessful to maybe moderate during their initial releases have actually been reassessed and now have, as I mentioned, either reached cult status or classic status. Films like Phantom of the Paradise, Blowout, Scarface, Body Double, Carlito's Way, and Femme Fatale. And that's just to go along with the already impressive filmography that features Sisters, Obsession, Carrie, Dressed to Kill, The Untouchables, Casualties of War, and Mission Impossible. This would also vindicate those of us who have always appreciated De Palma. I try not to call anyone like the greatest in their field because all that's subjective and I feel like it's all art anyway. But he's certainly one of our greatest filmmakers. And it's all the sadder that Brian De Palma has been so underappreciated over the years. Where's his Oscar, for example? He's never even received a nomination. Where's De Palma's Lifetime Achievement Awards? His career has actually only been honored by the Hampton Film Festival and the Venice Film Festival. Meanwhile, Francis Ford Coppola just received a Kennedy Center honor this past year, and now this new year, he's going to receive the very prestigious American Film Institute Lifetime Achievement Award, or the AFI Award. Now that means the AFI, now hear me out here, the AFI will have given that honor to every member of the so-called New Hollywood directors. That's Spielberg, Scorsese, Lucas, and now Coppola. Everyone except Brian De Palma. He is the only one who's been left out so far. But it's not too late. Whatever you think of this scientific study, maybe you're not convinced that Brian De Palma is the third greatest director of all time, but you do have to admit he's among the very best. So many of his films have been, reassessed. He's influenced powerful filmmakers like Ty West, Edgar Wright, Guillermo del Toro, Paul Thomas Anderson, and Quentin Tarantino. Two other admirers, Noah Baumbach and Jake Paltrow, made a highly acclaimed documentary called De Palma a few years ago. And instant buzz was created when Brian De Palma recently suggested that he was planning to direct one more film. So my hope is that the Motion Picture Academy, but especially the American Film Institute, will do the right thing very soon and honor Brian De Palma for his lifetime of achievement. It's not only well-deserved, but it would be long overdue.